Hello, my name is Miss Jones. I teach elementary school math, and welcome to my channel, Miss Math Jones. Today we're going to be working on our third grade Eureka Module 5, Lesson 18 homework. The objective for this lesson's homework is to practice placing various fractions on the number line. So all we're doing for this homework is placing different fractions on number lines. Let's get started. Let's take a look at number 1. Number 1 says locate and label the following fractions on the number line. So I noticed that all of my fractions are halves. 1/2, 4 halves, 5 halves. So that means that every 2 lines, I'm going to have a whole number because that would represent a whole piece, right? So let's go ahead and partition this fraction line or this number line so that you can see what we're talking about. Now, we start at 0, right? But there's a line already there. So at our starting point, we don't count the line at our starting point because that's our starting point. We haven't gone anywhere yet. So let's go ahead and start partitioning into halves. So if we start at 0, this is the first line. So 1, 2. We're at one whole. See that? Every 2 lines is another whole number because 2 halves make a whole. All right? Now, let's do it again. 1, 2. Now we're at the whole number 2 because every 2 halves is another whole. And we're going to do it again. 1, 2. Now we're at the whole number 3. Again, every 2 halves is a whole. Now that we have our number line partitioned correctly into halves, we're going to go ahead and label each point on our number line. So we're going to start with 0. What fraction would be right below 0 since we are counting by halves? Well, if you said 0 halves, you'd be correct. So we're going to start our number line with 0 halves because we're counting by halves. And with a number line, you just count up. So when you're counting, what number comes after 0? If you said 1, you're absolutely correct. So we're at 1/2. Now, after 1/2 would be 2 halves. And 2 halves is directly below the number 1 because 2 halves is the same thing as 1 whole. And I know this because 2 divided by 2 is 1. Now let's keep counting up. After 2 would be 3. 3 halves. After 3 halves would be 4 halves. And I write my 4 halves underneath the number 2 because 4 halves is equivalent or equal to 2. I know that because 4 divided by 2 is 2. Let's keep counting because we're not quite to the end of our number line. So after 4 would be 5. That's 5 halves. Then after 5 halves would be 6 halves. Now, I know that 6 halves is in the correct location under the number 3 because 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, I have completed labeling my number line of halves, but it says to locate and label the following fractions on the number line. So the first fraction it asks us to locate is 1/2. So when I locate 1/2, I'm going to place a point there because we're actually plotting points on a number line or locating and placing a dot on points on a number line or locations. So we've located 1/2 and we placed a dot on 1/2 or we plotted a point on 1/2. The next fraction we're supposed to locate is 4 halves. So we find 4 halves and we plot a point or place a dot at 4 halves. And finally, we have 5 halves. So we locate 5 halves and we place a point or a dot. We plot a point at 5 halves. Now, you might want to pause your video just to make sure that your paper looks like my screen, to make sure that you have everything correct. Let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 says to locate and label the following fractions on the number line. Well, first, let's take a look at what fraction we're working with, or what fractional unit we're working with. I noticed that the denominator, or the bottom number, on all of the fractions are the number 3, which means that the fractional unit that we're working with is thirds. So I need to partition my number line into thirds, which means that I'm going to use 3 lines. And every third line means that I've reached one whole. So notice we start at the number 2 and not 0. And that's going to be very important for when we are figuring out what fraction to start our number line with. But first, let's go ahead and partition our number line into thirds. So remember, we need 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. Remember, every 3 lines is one whole because 3 thirds is one whole. All right, we've not reached the end of our number line, so we need to do it again. 1, 2, 3. And again, I've created another whole because 3 thirds is one whole. Now, again, our number line starts with the number 2. So to figure out what fraction we start with, we have to ask ourselves this question. What number divided by thirds is going to give me 2? What number divided by thirds is going to give me 2? What number divided by 3 is equal to 2? Now, you could also figure it out by turning that division equation into a multiplication equation, which would be 3 times 2. Well, what's 3 times 2? Well, if you said 6, you're absolutely correct. So that means that the fraction that I need to start my number line with is 6 thirds. Now, this is a number line, which means we count up in number order. So since my first fraction is 6 thirds, then my next fraction is going to be 7 thirds. What number comes after 7 when you're counting? That's right, 8. So my next fraction is 8 thirds. Now, you see that whole number? Well, that whole number can be represented as a fraction. So my next number on my number line is 9 thirds. And I'm going to write 9 thirds right below my whole number of 3. Because 9 thirds is the same thing as 3. I know that because 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now, I've not reached the end of my number line, so I need to keep counting. What number comes after 9 when you're counting? That's right, 10. So the next fraction on my number line is going to be 10 thirds. After 10 thirds would be, of course, 11 thirds. After 11 thirds, finally, 12 thirds. And I know that 12 thirds is supposed to be underneath the number 4 because 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that means that 12 thirds is equivalent or equal to 4. Now, I'm supposed to locate these fractions on this number line. So the first fraction that we need to locate is 11 thirds. Let's locate 11 thirds and plot a point or place a dot at 11 thirds. Right there. The next fraction I need to locate on my number line is 6 thirds. Let's locate 6 thirds and plot a point at 6 thirds. Well, 6 thirds is the fraction we started our number line with. So go ahead and plot a point at 6 thirds or place a dot at 6 thirds. The final fraction we need to locate is 8 thirds. So let's go ahead and locate 8 thirds. And we're going to plot a point or place a dot at 8 thirds. Now at this point, you might want to pause your video to make sure that your paper looks like my screen. let's take a look at number 3. Number 3 says locate and label the following fractions on the number line. Now, I look at all the fractions I'm supposed to locate, and the denominator, or the bottom number, is 4, which means I need to partition my number line into fourths. Now, because my denominator is 4, and I need to partition my number line into fourths, I need 4 lines. Every 4 lines is another whole number, because 4 fourths equals 1 whole. Notice this number line starts at 3. And we're going to have to think about what fraction to start our number line with, because it starts with the whole number 3. But we have to partition our number line first. So let's go ahead and partition our number line into fourths. We're going to need 4 lines for each whole. So count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how we're on the next whole number? And we have to do it again. So we start over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we've reached another whole number because 4 fourths is 1 whole. So every time you get to a fourth, that's another whole number completed. All right, we're not to the end of our number line yet, so let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're at our last whole number. Again, 4 fourths is 1 whole. Now that we've partitioned our number line correctly into fourths, we need to figure out what fraction we should begin our number line with. Now, we're counting by fourths, and it starts with the whole number 3. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what number can you divide by fourths that will equal 3? What number can you divide by 4, or fourths, that would equal 3? Now, you can also turn this into a multiplication problem and say 4 times 3. Well, what's 4 times 3? If you said 12, you are absolutely correct. So that means that I'm going to start my number line with 12 fourths. Now again, it's a number line, so we count up in number order. If we're starting with 12 fourths, what number comes after 12 when you're counting? That's right, 13. So our next fraction on the number line is going to be 13 fourths. And then we keep counting up. So we're going to go ahead and fill in our number line. We have 13 fourths and now 14 fourths, 15 fourths, 16 fourths, and make sure you're writing 16 fourths below the number 4, because 16 fourths is equivalent or equal to the number 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4, so I know that that's correct. Now, after you write 16 fourths below the number 4, we need to keep counting because we've not reached the end of our number line. So after 16 is 17 fourths, 18 fourths, 19 fourths, 20 fourths. Now make sure 20 fourths is under the number 5, because 20 fourths is equivalent or equal to the number 5. I know that because 20 divided by 4 is 5. Now, I've not reached the end of my number line, so I need to keep counting. So after 20 fourths, you have 21 fourths, then 22 fourths. After that, 23 fourths. And finally, 24 fourths. Now, make sure 24 fourths is written under the number 6. And I know it's supposed to be there because 24 divided by 4 is 6. So that means that 24 fourths is equivalent or equal to 6. Now that we've labeled our number line correctly, we need to locate these fractions that it asks us to locate. The first fraction we need to locate is 20/4. So once you locate 20/4, I want you to plot a point or place a dot on the line where 20/4 is located. The next fraction that it tells us to locate is 13/4. So locate 13/4 on your number line and plot a point or place a dot on the line where 13/4 is located. And the last fraction that it tells us to locate is 23/4. So we're going to locate 23/4 on our number line and plot a point or place a dot on the line where 23/4 is located. Now, you may want to pause your video so that you can make sure your paper looks like my screen. Now we're at number 4. Number 4 says Wayne went on a 4-kilometer hike. He took a break at 4/3 kilometer and he took a drink of water at 10/3 kilometers. Show Wayne's hike on the number line. Include his starting and finishing place and the 2 points where he stopped. Now, if Wayne went on a 4-kilometer hike and he took breaks at 4/3 kilometers and took a drink of water at 10/3 kilometers, I notice that my denominators are 3s, which means I have to partition my number line into thirds. So let's go ahead and partition this number line into thirds. I'm going to place my endpoint and write the number 0 here and box it in so that I have a starting point. So I'm going to start at 0. And my ending point, as you'll see, will be a 4 because he took a 4-kilometer hike. But let's go ahead and partition this into thirds. So we have 3 lines, and every 3 lines is 1 whole. So that's my first line. 1, 2, 3. That's 1 whole. So every 3 lines is 1 whole. 1, 2, 3. That's 2 wholes. Okay? Every 3 lines, or every 3/3 is a whole. Every 3/3 is a whole. Now remember, you went on a 4-kilometer hike, which means my end point on the other end is going to be a 4. But we need to keep partitioning, okay? So 1, 2, 3. That's another 3/3. So now we're at 3 wholes. Okay? And we need to do it one more time. So 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. That's another whole. And now we're at 4 wholes. So make sure when you partition your number line, it looks exactly like mine. Starts at 0, ends at 4. All right, now we're going to label our number line. And we're going to start labeling under the 0. And since we start with 0, then the first fraction on our number line is going to be 0/3. And it's a number line, so we count up in number order. So after 0/3, it's 1/3. Then 2/3. Underneath the number 1, you're going to write 3/3 because 3/3 is equal to or equivalent to 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I know that that fraction is in the right place. And we're going to continue counting. So after 3/3, it's 4/3. Then 5/3. Then 6/3. And make sure that you write 6/3 under the number 2 because 6/3 is equivalent or equal to the number 2. because 6 divided by 3 is 2. We're not quite at the end of our number line, so we need to keep counting on. So after 6/3 would be 7/3, then 8/3, then 9/3. Now make sure you're writing 9/3 and boxing it in underneath the number 3, because 9/3 is equivalent or equal to 3. I know this because 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now, I'm still not at the end of my number line, so I keep counting on. After 9/3, it's 10/3, then 11/3, and finally 12/3. And make sure to write 12/3 underneath the number 4, because 12 divided by 3 is 4. That means that 12/3 is equivalent or equal to the number 4. Now, at this point, you might want to pause your video to make sure that your number line is labeled correctly and it looks like mine. Best practice is to place those fractions in boxes to keep them neat and together so you don't have numbers all over the place. All right, now we have our number line labeled correctly, and we need to plot points where he took a break. So he took a break at 4/3 kilometers. So let's make sure that we mark the start, right? And we're going to plot where he took a break right here. So you're going to write start above 0, and you're going to write break and put a dot at 4/3 where he took a break. Now, it says he took a drink of water at 10/3 kilometers. So we're going to locate 10/3 kilometers, and you can just write water there and plot a point or place a dot at 10/3. Now, I'm going to reread the directions to make sure that we've done everything that we were supposed to do. It says Wayne went on a 4-kilometer hike. Well, that's shown in our model. He took a break at 4/3 kilometers. I've plotted a point at 4/3 and wrote the word break. He took a drink of water at 10/3 kilometers. I've plotted a point at 10/3 and wrote the word water at 10/3. Show Wayne's hike on the number line. That's what we've done. Include his starting and finishing place. That's the start point where it says start, and finish where it says finish. And the 2 points where he stopped. Yep, that's there. All right, so we've done everything that we were supposed to do. At this point, you might want to pause your video to make sure that you have everything on your paper that I have on my screen. Let's take a look at the last question of our homework, number 5. Number 5 says, Allie wants to buy a piano. The piano measures 19/4 feet long. She has a space 5 feet long for the piano in her house. Does she have enough room? Draw a number line to show and explain your answer. All right. I noticed that the denominator or bottom number in my fraction is a 4, which means I need to partition my number line into fourths. So that means that every 4 lines is one whole. Well, look, it's already done for us. We have 4 lines that ends in a whole 5 feet. So let's go ahead and make sure we have 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 4 lines that ends in our whole of 5 feet. Perfect. Now I'm going to label my number line. So I need to think about this. What number divided by fourths would equal 4? What number divided by fourths, or what number divided by 4 would equal 4? Now, if you don't know that, what you can do is turn it into a multiplication problem. And you can multiply 4 times 4. Well, what's 4 times 4? 4 times 4 is 16. Very good. So that means I'm going to start my number line off with 16/4. Now remember, everything I have on my screen, you should have on your paper. So make sure that you're labeling everything and even writing out the little equations below 4 feet. Now, since I'm starting my number line with 16/4, and when we are counting on a number line, we count in number order. So after 16/4, my next fraction is going to be 17/4. After 17/4, 18/4. After 18/4, 19/4. After 19/4, 20/4. Now, I know that the fractions at my endpoints are correct because I can divide to check my answer. Now, above 4 feet, I have the fraction 16/4. Well, I know that that fraction is in the right place because 16 divided by 4 is 4. Below 5 feet, I have the fraction 20 divided by 4, or 20/4. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. So that fraction is in the correct place also. So now that I've made sure that my number line is partitioned and labeled correctly, I can locate 19/4 because the piano measures 19/4 feet long. Well, I see 19/4, so I'm just going to draw an arrow from 16/4 to 19/4, just like that. So I plot it, and I'm going to draw an arrow. I want you to plot it by drawing a dot on the line that represents 19/4 and draw an arrow from the beginning of your number line to 19/4. That's how much space the piano is going to take up. All right? That's how much space the piano is going to take up. Now, the question asks you, does she have enough room? Yes or no? Because she has 5 feet to work with. Did she use all 5 feet? No, she didn't. So that means that, yes, she will have enough room. She's actually going to have 1/4 feet of space left, because that's 1/4 left on that number line with nothing there. So yes, she's going to have enough room. She will have enough room. She will have 1/4 feet of space left. So let's reread our question to make sure we have everything completed from the word problem. So again, it says Allie wants to buy a piano. The piano measures 19/4 feet long. Well, we've plotted 19/4 on our number line. She has space, or has a space, 5 feet long for the piano in her house. Well, we see that on the number line also. Does she have enough room? Well, it's only taken up to that 19/4 line. So that means that yes, she has enough room. We drew a number line to show and explain our answer. So number 5 is now complete. If you need to, pause your video right now to make sure that your paper matches my screen. Congratulations! Lesson 18 homework is complete. As always, I hope this video has helped you to complete your homework correctly and help you to understand Lesson 18 a little bit better. I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening whenever you're watching this video. And as always, make sure to check your work in math just to make sure your math is mathing. And this is Miss Jones saying bye until next time.